Every city in America is faced with the problems of homeless, indigent, or transient people. Governments and private organizations try to meet the basic needs of food, shelter, clothing, and medical care, although often the resources are not adequate to the task. The police are often left to fill in the gaps, and in this sense, the city of Fort Pierce, Florida is like many others. But in important ways, every city's problem is unique. In the fall of 1990, Officer Gene Serig, assigned to the downtown area and the beaches of Fort Pierce, began to receive a number of complaints from citizens, tourists, local fishermen, and merchants about panhandling, petty thefts, garbage being left in the parks, and the disorderly behavior of certain individuals in a downtown park near the riverfront. To verify the precise nature of the problem, Officer Serig began to patrol the area more closely and interview frequent users of the park and park maintenance workers. He also began to systematically field interview the persons suspected of creating the nuisance. In addition to documenting their identification, he asked them why they chose to hang out in that particular location. Many of them told him that they chose a place where the police wouldn't bother them. It was close to a local grocery store that sold cheap beer and wine and didn't discriminate against intoxicated persons. The park and the surrounding downtown area also provided a steady stream of income through panhandling. Officer Serig's survey of the environment revealed that many of the transient men were sleeping under the South Beach Bridge. He also noted that the height and spacing of the bushes in the park allowed the transients concealment and shade. Suspecting that these kinds of problems might not be limited to the downtown area, Officer Serig asked other patrol officers to notify him of problems elsewhere in the city. This method confirmed that at least 5 other parks experienced problems, but interestingly, the particular problems were different in each park. Some parks were favored by older alcoholics. One park was frequented by drug addicts of all ages. One of the parks, known as the Savannas, is a naturally wild habitat that appealed to a number of rugged men who liked to be left alone. Most were not alcoholics. They stole what they needed and then retreated to the woods. Although preferring to commit crimes of opportunity, if confronted, they could be very intimidating to the merchants. Most thefts occurred in shops and parking lots along nearby U.S. Highway 1. Many incidents of failure to pay for meals were also linked to these individuals. Using the Sheriff Department's helicopter, Officer Gene Serig and his trusted cameraman conducted aerial reconnaissance of the park because the woods are large and difficult to penetrate on foot. The photographs confirmed the existence of fairly elaborate encampments. It turned out that the encampments were located near a set of railroad tracks over which 22 trains per day traveled between Florida and points north. While working on a different problem involving noise complaints at the railroad switching yard, Officer Serig noted that the transients used the trains regularly for transportation. There were other places along the tracks elsewhere in the city that were being used as hopping off points. Bridge overpasses were the most popular.
Usually you travel in the daytime, nighttime? When did you
usually nighttime. I mean,
what age bracket are we dealing with here that you've noticed comes into your facility?
They're all ages, from say in the 20s all the way up to your 50s and 60s. And it's not just men.
And you'll see how many's here. Sometimes it's 4 or 5. Early Sunday morning.
Are a lot of the senior citizens scared of these guys, intimidated by their actions and what they do?
They're intimidated when they're around, but as long as we got enough people around here to protect them, they'll come and they'll play shuffleboard. If we don't have enough people in, a crowd is...
Realizing that he was dealing with a larger, more complex problem than he first imagined, Officer Serig knew he would have to attack the problem one step at a time. He began by recontacting the downtown merchants to let them know that he was aware of the problem and would need their cooperation to solve it. He assured them that he would increase his visibility in the area, but in exchange, he needed them to contact him on his pager whenever they had a problem with the individuals. Officer Serig also recommended that the merchants stop giving money and food directly to the transients and to discourage their customers from doing the same. Although the merchants felt they were helping solve a social problem, in reality, They were doing little to solve the larger problems of hunger and poverty, but were encouraging other behavior that was destroying both the individual transients and the commerce of the community. For about 3 weeks, Officer Serig had to stand on the streets daily to discourage people from giving money to the transients. This tactic was very tiring and unpleasant, but necessary to break some long entrenched practices. The next step was to make contact with the organizations and agencies that provide services to transient and indigent people. Officer Serig educated himself about the particular services each organization could deliver. He learned that there were 4 agencies he could count on. The Salvation Army provided subsistence-level food, clothing, and made referrals for medical care. The Mustard Seed Ministry provided emergency shelter, clothing, and food for homeless families, and made referrals to state public assistance agencies. The Church of God provided short-term shelter for alcoholics and medical referrals. The State Department of Human Rehabilitative Services provided rehabilitation services for alcoholics and drug addicts who volunteered to participate. A few other churches and businesses agreed to notify Officer Serig if they could feed transients on holidays. Working with a local advocate for migrant workers, Officer Serig also made referrals for Spanish-speaking transients. To motivate some of the transients to seek assistance, Officer Serig set about making it uncomfortable for them to reside in the bushes of the parks and under the bridges. He arranged for the railroad company to spray a pesticide that was non-toxic to humans in places where transients' living habits attracted rodents. He had the Parks Department trim the bushes and shrubs in the parks and install new sprinkler heads near the more popular sleeping spots. Gates were installed across the stairwells of some of the businesses and government buildings in order to prevent transients from sleeping there.
See what that sign there says? What does that sign say?
Yeah, they're not trespassing.
That's you. You got to get down the road.
The sanitation department was contacted to make more frequent pickups at dumpsters and have damaged dumpsters repaired. Sanitation supervisors agreed to monitor this. A few store owners were made to take steps to ensure that sanitation trucks had access to the dumpsters. Restaurant owners were advised to place the food waste at the bottom of the dumpster where it would be less visible. At fast food restaurants, Officer Serig had the managers put locks on their dumpsters.
Installing a lock that when the business closes and secures for the end of the night, they lock it up, prohibiting anybody from throwing any refuse in there or getting anything out of the dumpsters.
Merchants were encouraged to limit the number and type of garbage containers in their alleyways. A few uncooperative merchants and at least one government agency were reminded by city code enforcement inspectors of their legal obligations and fined for failure to comply. Officer Serig testified at several hearings. Officer Serig issued verbal warnings to transients advising them of the city ordinance prohibiting picking through garbage containers. Photographs that revealed the sanitation problem were shown to interested city officials to keep them informed of the scope of the problem and the police response to it.
Close patrol for transients are the following locations: underneath the South Bridge, the gazebo of Seaway and Indian River Drive. Reports of transients drinking and sleeping in that park.
He encouraged other officers to refer difficult persons to him. The problem in the woods of the Savannah's Park proved to be more difficult. Officer Serig attempted to get the state fire marshal to survey the area and do a controlled burn. Environmental concerns made this approach impractical.
54, Bill and I are out in the middle of the boondocks for the police right now.
Code enforcement inspectors advised an absentee property owner to clear out the underbrush and the garbage. Upon his refusal, the city cleared out the brush and fined the owner $1,300. Unfortunately, this action adversely affected the cooperative relationship with the police and for the time being has slowed down the cleanup effort. Other codes and statutes that regulate public camping are currently being researched. Officer Serig and the train engineers worked out a train whistle code to notify the officer if there were transients riding the train. More than a few transients were surprised to find the police welcoming committee. What are the results of Officer Serig's efforts? The problems by no means have been completely eliminated, but there are some important indicators that progress has been made. Officer Serig estimates that he identified approximately 35 causing problems when he first began the project. 1 year later, he estimates about 6 problem individuals who remain in the city year-round and another 6 who are seasonal. It is rare for Officer Serig to encounter a transient whose name and background he doesn't know. This has improved the ability of the police to refer transients to agencies or places that can be of assistance. The transients also know the officer. Some now call the police station to check on Officer Serig's schedule. The investigation of this seemingly large problem has now been broken down into several distinct and more manageable problems. Aluminum can collecting poses a slightly different set of problems for the police that will demand their own solutions. Another Fort Pierce police officer has been separately trying to reduce the number of abandoned shopping carts on the streets.
Where'd she go?
There's 573. I'll be at 308 South 13 for 500.
Visually, the streets and alleyways of the downtown area have improved. Casual interviews with the merchants, office workers, park maintenance workers, and fishermen indicate lowered levels of concern and increased use of the public parks.
For a while attracted the vagrants and the panhandlers, but the downtown police have been very cooperative. They make sure that it's patrolled and everything is kept clean downtown, so it's discouraged them and people can really come down and walk around.
Dispatch records do not separately code complaints on transients and panhandlers, and few reports are written on these kinds of calls anyway, but Officer Serig has received fewer direct and dispatched complaints on transient persons. The larger social problems of homelessness, mental illness, substance abuse, and poverty persist in Fort Pierce and elsewhere, and the police cannot assume sole responsibility for their resolution. But it is our experience in Fort Pierce that the persistence, intelligence, and conscientiousness of even a single police officer can motivate other people and agencies to work systematically toward more effective and humane responses to even the most difficult of society's problems.